On today's podcast, we have Peter Bennett, the Chief Executive Officer of Clough, a pioneering project delivery company with over 1,000 employees across Australia and the Asia Pacific region. So Peter, we know your name, we know the company that you work for, but I have the pleasure of working with you due to you being the chair of our board at CGE, which I'm really grateful for. But I'd love for our listeners to get a wee bit more of an insight into who is Peter Bennett. So share with us a little bit more to set the scene for our listeners.
Sure. Well, I guess started out, grew up in a small country town in Western New South Wales, and started my career in Sydney as an engineer. Fortunately, I had the opportunity with that organisation to work in a lot of different locations internationally. So I spent quite some time in Southeast Asia, in Europe, in the US, in the Middle East, in the UK, in Australia, then back into Europe. And then when I joined Clough, moved back to Perth here about 8 years ago.
Awesome. And what about, what do you do for fun? How do you let off steam? Family?
Well, I have an awesome family at home. So I've got a 14-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl, and a wife, obviously, Juliet, that is really probably a large part of the reason why my interest in CG is as strong as it is.
Okay, you've got to tell us more about that.
Well, probably not unusually, we were colleagues for quite some time before we started dating. And one of the things that I noticed, and certainly have learned since, is the challenges that she faced as a female leader in a business were quite different than what me as a male faced in the business. And certainly, the fairness aspect of it is certainly one of those pieces that is frustrating. But beyond that is the fact that I think so many people overlook some of the talent and capability and substance of what some of our female colleagues are able to provide because they can't get past the gender lens.
Okay, great. So Juliet sparked that kind of...
Yeah, I mean, Juliet's, she's much smarter, much more experienced than I am, and could run this business better than I could, no doubt. But hasn't had the same opportunities I had, and certainly I think large parts of that are probably due to the gender balance.
Okay, great. And I love that you've said that before, and I just love that you kind of call that out. That's gold.
It's hard to hide it.
So, Peter, this podcast is all about sharing real and raw stories of impact, and I'm kind of privy to what's other things which have sparked your journey. But I'd love to kind of kick off with the questions for our listeners, with you sharing. Was there a defining moment or experience, aside from what you've shared with Juliet, that really ignited your passion for gender equity?
Well, I think one of the things that's probably shaped my views a little bit is the fact that I have worked in a lot of different locations, and certainly different cultures, different societies, different countries are in a different place relative to where they are in terms of diversity and the workplace. And I think I spent quite some time. In fact, I've worked in Holland longer than I've worked in Australia, and they have a very different perspective. And I'd say in that workplace environment, they're a lot further advanced in the diversity and gender equity stakes than we are here. So it was quite a surprise for me to come back to Australia and recognise that we had a lot of work to do. Some of the early things for me was looking at things like WGEA reporting and some of those statutory requirements we have in Australia. And frankly, I understood that I didn't really know what gender pay gap was. I thought we were in good shape because same job, same pay. I mean, that's the law, and we managed to that well. But I genuinely didn't understand what the gender pay gap was. Your predecessor, Tanya Ciccone, helped correct me in that space. But I also found that more broadly, that was a fairly foreign theme for a lot of people, and really probably set that stage for the fact that we've got so much education required before, as an industry or as a region, we can start to make progress.
Awesome, thank you. And I think, the publishing earlier this year by the Workplace Gender Equality Agency of all the gender pay gaps of companies with 100 or more employees, I think that sparked definitely a bit of a acceleration in improving that. But I just want to wind back a little bit, and I'd love to hear more about your experience when you were in Holland. So how did their advancement of gender equity, like what did that look like and sound like in the workplace, in society?
I think, I mean, and Holland's been a trading nation for many, many thousands of years, and culturally, they've got a tremendous work-life balance in their society as well. And what I found was you weren't having those conversations at work around women versus men. It was just people were promoted on their capability, people were managed in accordance with their capability, not their appearance. It was a very, very different sorts of discussions. And I found that certainly having worked in other locations where those conversations are very different, and people do comment on the appearance of their colleagues and those sorts of things, which really has no place in the workplace. And I didn't see that in Holland. They really had moved past that, and it was a very productive environment.
Awesome. And what about in home life, or elements of the workplace which flow into home? Like one of the big things we're advocating for at CEOs for Gender Equity is to get more men engaged in taking parental leave. So did you have any exposure to kind of what that looked like in Holland?
Yeah, look, certainly Holland has a tremendous support system in their healthcare program. They have this Kramzorg program which provides home help or home support post arrival of the child, and really they will make the meals, do the cleaning, do those sorts of things with the sole goal of helping or allowing the parents to bond with their child and develop that relationship together. So a fantastic support network. You get 42 hours of Kramzorg help regardless of your situation. So it's really quite good, but it drives towards you learning to bond with your child, and also then you as a family unit figuring out how to move forward.
Like how good is that? Like that's so practical.
Very practical, and that's probably the thing that I would use to describe Dutch. Very pragmatic and practical, and it was a tremendous place to raise a family and certainly to work in.
And it sounds like, because they've got this work-life blend, like that's kind of part and parcel with gender equity is, flexibility and making that, like prioritizing time with like your family and your friends and your mental health and everything. So it seems like it's all just flowing and working and leading to really happy people. Everyone must be delighted over there.
Look, yes, and I think that's one of the strong messages that your predecessor inspired me with was you've also got the ethical reasons behind gender equity is one we all know and understand very well, but articulating the business case and why is it important to have that balance in your workplace, and why is it a good thing for your business. And I think we all know, happy employees are productive employees, right? And so if you're unable to deal with the situations in your personal life, then that is going to carry over into your work life. And I think that was one of the areas from Holland that they did value that balance, and so you did see quite a productive workforce. One of the things that also surprised me when I got back to the Netherlands, back to Perth actually, is looking at those policies for parental leave, for flexible work and so on, discovered that at that time Clough was, I think, about 99 years old and had never had a male take parental leave ever. Right? And so because that I guess that cultural expectation around parental leave is for the mother, not for the father. And so getting that kind of stereotype and moving beyond that was quite a milestone for us. And I think as of today, we still have just slightly more than 50% of the people that take parental leave in our business are males, actually. So quite a shift in the way that's been used within the business.
Like that's one thing. I'm glad you brought that up, because if you didn't, I was going to ask you about that, because it's one of the things which it's a great success story, going from 0 men having taken parental leave ever to now more than 50-50. So can you just, in your own words, like share, if there's other business owners or CEOs listening to this podcast, how can they achieve that? What would you put that down to?
Well, look, some of it is, I think, just generational change as well. So the people that are coming into the workforce and experiencing, starting families at this stage, are a different generation to myself, and so they do have different expectations. But I think what the obligation on people like myself and fellow CEOs is creating the environment where there's the kind of historical stigma associated with men being soft and taking time off is no longer one of the things that people have to deal with, because people do expect it. And again, the business imperative is, if you want people to want to stay with your organisation, and employee retention is such a critical part of our business. Employee turnover is a very costly part for any business. So having the sort of work environment where people want to be there and people know that they can balance their life and meet those family obligations as well as being supported at work, that really should be the goal that we try and drive to.
Great. So some of the senior leaders, especially the men, were kind of encouraged to take the policy and do it loudly and proudly.
Yeah, and look, and I think one of the first emails I sent out to the business in general was that it is expected that you attend your kids' sport carnivals, that you do those drop-offs if needed or pick-ups if needed, and you do make sure that you keep that support for your family available as well. The wheels at Clough are not going to stop turning if I leave work early to pick up my son from school, and so I do that, and I do make sure that people are aware that I do that, and that it's okay to do that.
That's so good, and I know that to drive that big shift from 0 to over 50, you kind of made a few tweaks to the policy itself as well, from memory. Can you tell us more about that?
And again, I'm not the one who's going to come up with all these good ideas, and certainly part of what's really helped us is being able to listen to people that have been through that process. What have they found within our policies that's helpful? What's a hindrance? And so we made quite a lot of changes to the way our parental leave and our flexible work leave and those sorts of policies that support that environment are structured. And we did that by getting feedback from people that have been through it and experienced it. And that's been really, really helpful for our organisation.
Awesome. It's not rocket science, isn't it? It's just listening to your target market.
Exactly. It's not rocket science, but I don't have that lived experience either. So now I have been a parent and I did take parental leave when I was in the Netherlands, but I haven't been through some of the other parts of it. And so certainly from a lot of those elements that come into that, getting feedback from some of my female colleagues that have been through a parental leave program, either at Clough or elsewhere, has been really invaluable in getting us the right sort of tweaks that we're able to do. And look, most of them were not high cost impact to the business. In fact, most of them were fairly minor, but they were just around the way those policies operated and the way it supported people in that stage of their life.
Because I think one thing you did was obviously the obvious thing is to take away the maternity and paternity leave, right? And so now it's primary and secondary care, or obviously some organisations have gone a step further and it's just parental leave for anyone. So you took away obviously the gendered terminology, and am I right in saying you introduced a bit more flexibility in how it could be taken as well?
Yeah, and that was part of the feedback, right? Everybody's circumstances are different, and so having the flexibility there, so that you don't have a prescriptive process, but something that has a bit of flexibility in it that can adapt to different circumstances and different needs was part of the goal.
Great. And what has been some of the or have you heard some feedback from some of the men in Clough who've taken it?
Probably one of the better bits of feedback I had was from one of my male colleagues who was a field supervisor, so not an office-based role or anything, but a field supervisor, and he was transitioning out of a project that was completing and looking for an opportunity elsewhere, and he came to me at one point asking about these organisations that he was looking at joining, and one of his key criteria was looking at their parental leave policies, their diversity policies, because he wanted to work for an organisation that espoused those same values and didn't want to step backwards. And so for part of our field supervisory workforce having that I guess that mindset or that parameter around what constitutes an organisation he wants to work for versus what doesn't is real progress.
And how great he's had that exposure at Clough to kind of set the standard, and now that's what he was looking to at least get matched in that next role.
Well, I think there is that expectation. There is a different expectation generationally in terms of all sorts of things, be it flexibility in the workplace, diversity in the workplace, and different things. And I think as organisations, we're not doing ourselves any favours if we don't find ways to accommodate those different mindsets as well, because frankly, that's the resource pool we need to try and attract into the business to be able to deliver the work that we do. And so if we don't appeal to as broad a spectrum of that resource pool, then we're not doing our business any favours by adhering to practices that are out of date.
So good. Thank you for sharing that. And so, you've been involved now as a member of CEOs for Gender Equity since about 2008.
Yep.
I think. And I love the story of how you kind of got exposed to CEOs for Gender Equity and how you kind of made that decision to get involved. So can you maybe share that from your perspective with our listeners?
Look, it was, and I guess there was a number of things that came across there, but certainly I was invited out to a session out at Edith Cowan University there one time where we had again, one of the things I like about the organisation is that it's not just people from the construction industry. There's quite a broad spectrum of businesses and markets that are represented there, and really the discussions out there were again, as I reflect back to working in different locations, a bit alarming around some of the data and some of the I guess the size of the hill that we had to climb here in Australia, and sitting at that meeting, it became pretty apparent that as an organisation or as a sector, particularly here in WA, we had a lot of work to do.
And so you thought that coming and learning and sharing from others would help you get there faster?
Yeah, and I think that was, if you go back, I guess, to the inception of CG way back when, it was around, I think, some of the early data around gender pay gap and diversity in the workplace, and the fact that WA ranked lowest within Australia, and the business community came together and said, this is really not good enough, we've got to do something about it, hence the organisation was formed. And I think that for me is the really unique part of it. We do as members in the organisation that you lead. Ashley, we've got small 2-employee businesses up through some of the major global resource organisations and kind of everything in between. And we have resources, and we have education, and we have healthcare, and we have good representation from the public sector as well now, which is phenomenal. And so what it brings is so many different experiences, and being able to learn and share from each other is part of the value that being a member of CG provides.
100%. We draw on the collective knowledge and experience and resources so that we can all help each other get there faster, right? Don't reinvent the wheel.
Well, and look at the session that was held recently with the Returning to Work program and bringing people back into the workforce that have exited for a period. And it's not like people's knowledge and experience diminishes because they've been out of the workforce. They pick up different skills, and frankly, being a stay-at-home parent, that's a hugely complex job, as you well know, in terms of being able to multitask and time manage and crisis manage and frankly people management. It's a great learning experience for everybody. So why as an industry more broadly, we've not necessarily been taking advantage of that in the way we have. So that session the other day I thought was really encouraging, and there's some. It was great to see the interest from the members. I think broadly, CG members are very very much in tune with that, and it's great to be able to bring that capability and that resource back into industry, when we all know we talk about the war for talent all the time. That's a great resource for us all.
Thank you. Yeah, we were absolutely delighted with that pilot event. And, it's kind of, one of my questions to you is, how do you define gender equity and why do you think it's important in today's society? And I think the potential talent pool, which isn't being leveraged to as it could be at the moment in return to work parents, is a big part of the equation for me, you know, because it's workforce participation, which is good for everyone. Everyone benefits from. It breaks down further those kind of gendered norms and stereotypes around, you know, parents, and that you miss out, you know, if you're out of the workforce. So I think that was a great example of actually, let's just lift the lid up and you get some more insights into who's out there, and there was super qualified people.
Well,
It was
that's the point. There was quite a broad range of talent there at that event, and I spoke to people that were looking to come back in and take on administrative type roles. There was people that were more qualified than me, looking to get back into the workforce. So really good representation of the sort of talent that's available to come back into the workforce. And so the onus is now on us to be able to find ways to bring that talent in and utilise it. So it was a great event. It was a great event.
Thank you.
But you asked about how would we define gender diversity? I guess the ideal state is where we're not even talking about it, and I think that's where we'd all like to get to, right? When we're talking about colleagues or roles and things, it's not about, the term gender doesn't come up. You know, we should be assessing people and their capabilities, their potential, and their initiative. That's it, right? That's the same rules should be applied to everybody. There shouldn't be any distinction based upon gender, upon their, you know, the concern that they might step out and have start a family or something like that. Those sorts of, I guess, preconceptions or notions need to be behind us.
Awesome. And yeah, I tell everyone I'm trying to do myself out of a job. That's that is the goal,
Exactly.
right? That one day when we're older and grayer, wouldn't it be great if we could just kick back and say, let's wind this up?
Yeah, I hope not to be too much grey, but yeah, you're right. It would be good not to need an organisation, but I think the fact that at CG now there's 76 odd.
We're pushing 90 now.
90
Yep.
members now in the Perth community that have come together because they see the need to take action and do better in their space. And again, it's not everybody's because it's a fee paying organisation, so people aren't there just for the social feel good factor. They're there for making a difference and making a difference that will benefit their businesses. And that's pretty exciting. It's great to see that engagement and that recognition. And frankly, we all benefit, I think, from those sessions and sharing ideas with each other on what works.
Love it. Thank you. So are there any particular role models or mentors who've played a significant role in shaping your understanding of gender equity?
Look, obviously, I've talked about Juliet and seeing the world a bit through her lens, and I think that's been very important to me personally. But certainly, again, I mentioned Tanya Ciccone earlier. She was really good around being able to break down and disassociate the emotional piece from the business piece, and really getting down to the fundamental issues around what good looks like. We utilised CG as an organisation then to come into our business, do a bit of a health check, and have those conversations that from an independent third party that can conduct those conversations, understand where we were as a business, and that was really helpful for us. And I know a number of my colleagues had their aha moment during those sessions. Then they started to appreciate some of the ways that their female colleagues were being treated versus others, and changed their perceptions even in their personal lives. So really having somebody who's I guess more knowledgeable, more competent, understands the language better in that space, to come in and help us all understand how to have those conversations ourselves was really quite important.
That's awesome to hear. And so, what advice, part of what we want to do at CG and through this podcast is to kind of inspire and influence, everyone in our community. Yes, whether you're a CEO, whether you're, you're leading a family household, whether you're a teacher, doesn't matter. We just want everyone to try and get involved. So what advice would you have? Gender equity the profile has just gone so high so fast, and I feel like some people are feeling a wee bit overwhelmed with, okay, well, sounds great, but how can I contribute? So what would you say about, how anyone listening to this podcast today can just start to contribute to the cause?
Well, I think the first step is obviously recognising that we need to do something different, and then I guess recognising that there is no one solution that's going to solve it for you overnight. It's going to be a process, and then being open to listening. That's probably been the biggest thing for me. I know I don't have all the good ideas and aren't going to have all the solutions, but I'm surrounded by a very talented group of people that do, and so being open-minded to listen to them and to empower them to make some of the changes that have been effective in our business, and also leaning on other organisations. We get some great experiences and examples from other businesses across the sector. So I guess being open-minded is probably the best advice that I would give people.
Very good. And I have personally heard amazing feedback on you in a small but powerful thing which you do, as in the leading loudly and proudly on this, and if you're going to take one of your kids to the doctor or this kind of, you actually make a point that you don't like shy away and sneak out the door. You actually make a bit of a deal about it. And you could easily just slip out the back door, but that small point of not doing that and making it a bit of a thing about it, and really sets the tone for everyone else. So could you share, is that a conscious thing, or?
Look, it is a conscious thing, but it's one of those things that we know works well regardless of what the policy or issue is. If we're talking about health and safety, right? You've got to lead by example. So, if you're not on a job site exhibiting the same safe work practices and expectations that you demand of your workforce, then your credibility is zero, right? And you can't expect them to do it. So part of being a leader is that you're supposed to set the example and lead, and in all of the work practices, you should be being seen to do what you're telling others to do. And in terms of that, I do tell people that it is okay to go and take your child or your wife to the doctor if need be, or to attend those important events in their lives. So if I'm not doing the same, then that's not necessarily the message that you want to see. And I think that's been well, for me it's important, because it is important to me personally not to miss those doctor's appointments or those special events, and it shouldn't be any different for anybody else.
Awesome. So look, I'm sure in your gender equity journey since 2018, things haven't always been smooth. So I'd like to just ask you, is there a specific moment or experience where you faced adversity in your advocacy efforts, and how did you overcome it?
Look, there's all sorts of, everybody's got a different perspective, right? And you get, and everybody's perspective is their reality. So you can't dismiss it, you need to address it. And I think that's an important part of being a leader as well. In the early stages when we're looking to outline some of those programs and start to get a better understanding, you'd get that anonymous feedback around, being a left-wing organisation and all those sorts of things, right? So you can't ignore that stuff, and when you get that, I think we got some social media Peter Bennett sucks. Well, sometimes he does, right? It's not everything I do is always right. We all make mistakes. But addressing feedback is always important, and being open to communication. And I've had those same comments around all this focus on women in the business. What about my son? Who's going to give him a job? Those sorts of discussions. And being able to not dismiss them, but be able to sit down and talk with the individuals around the fact that it's not about a focus only on women. It's around getting a balance and getting to where people are evaluated on their merits and capabilities, not on with any kind of gender lens overview. So, if your son is better than my daughter, then he will get the job. But the opposite is true too. So let's make sure that those conversations are had, and we won't always agree. But I think one of the things that Australian culture really does respect is the right to be heard.
And I think that's a great point, because if you let these things fester, they can actually become bigger challenges, right? So yeah, just listening and kind of understanding where people are coming from is just such a inclusive approach to try and inspire and influence. Get them on board and see how they can benefit from this
Well,
movement
and
too.
quite often people that have got a different perspective will have a valid point. And so if you understand it a bit better, there might be something you can do that to modify your approach that can help help with progress.
So good. And, even the fact for people to feel comfortable, whether it's anonymous or not, to come with that feedback probably says a lot about the culture at Clough, in that you don't shy away from tough conversations.
And look, and Clough as a business has a fantastic culture as a business, and I think that stemmed from the long tenure that Harold Clough had when he was in the business, and really did keep those family values fairly close, and did make sure that engagement and empowerment were key parts of his ethos, and frankly, I inherit those cultural traits stay with the business today, and so I was very fortunate when I joined the organisation that we had that foundation to start from. So that's been really, really powerful, and I think as you walk up and down the terrace, there's many people that have at some point in their career had the opportunity to be part of the Clough organisation, and would tell you the same thing.
So good, and you're setting a great foundation for success. So I want to ask, what is the most important and rewarding aspect? So you're doing like a lot, personally and professionally, to promote gender equity. So what's the most rewarding part of it for you?
Look, I think the most rewarding part is how much the organisation has got behind it. So it's one thing for me to talk about it and to have policy changes and do different things and tick all those boxes. But it's another thing to see the organisation take hold of it and start to own it themselves. And so, giving our organisation the tools to be able to manage, plan, and I guess own that piece of their part of the business has been really, really good.
That's awesome. And especially an area which I love, you're putting your money where your mouth is developing that future pipeline, like your primary school, high school, university engagement. Like, you're doing some phenomenal stuff in that space. So if anyone wants to find out more, head to the Clough website and on your socials, where you share a lot of what you're doing there. So that's awesome.
Yeah, those programs have been really good. But I think, like all of us, we can a little bit like where we started with gender equity. We complain all day about not having enough female engineers available in the marketplace, and when they do, they're snapped up by the big resource companies with their deeper pockets and so on. But shame on us if we don't then go and try and do something about it, right? And so, how do we encourage a more diverse makeup in those tertiary institutions that turn out the engineers that we're looking for? So how do we make people aware that our industry is a really good industry to be part of, and that some of the stereotypes that have been associated with it in the past are not applicable anymore? So getting into the schools has been important. Getting people to at least take on the sorts of classes in their high school education period that will give them the option to do engineering or finance or whatever, because we need professionals in all aspects of our business, not just engineering. But that was probably the one that highlighted probably some of the more significant challenges around getting a more equitable or more diverse workforce.
Awesome. So looking ahead, Peter, what personal goals or aspirations do you have in your ongoing journey towards gender equity?
Look, I think continue to keep learning is probably my goal, right? I mean, we're a long way from where we want to be. We do a lot of work to try and understand where we are and how can we improve. And I guess the pleasing thing for us as a business is we do see progress year on year in terms of our workforce makeup, our gender pay gap, and so on. It is still a long way from what what the ideal is and to where we wouldn't need to be talking about it. But it's really pleasing to see that we are making progress. But we recognise that it doesn't come just by having a new policy or just by having a different recruitment program. It's constant attention. It's constant management of your workforce, which is what, as a leader, you should be doing anyway. It's a bit of a cliche, but our business is nothing but the people that make it up, and that's very, very true in our industry. We don't manufacture goods or we don't sell resources. We deliver projects with the expertise of the people we have, and we're fortunate enough to have some of the best people in the business, and we attract them because of the organisation we are. So we need to maintain that attractiveness and to be an employer of choice. And certainly having a diverse workforce is one of those keys to being able to stand up and be recognised as an employer of choice.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all that feedback and insights, which is now generously going to be shared with all our followers. I've got the privilege of reporting to you, and you kindly host Team CGA in your office, so we get to actually see and feel and hear, the impact of what you're doing, which is just such a joy, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and learn with you and to accelerate this most important cause. So thank you so much for sharing a bit more about Peter Bennett and a bit more about the gender equity journey for you and for Clough.
No, thank you very much, Ashley. And look, it's a pleasure to host you, and certainly supporting the organisation that's given us a lot is important for us, and really appreciate your energy and enthusiasm that you bring to leading the CG organisation. I think we benefit a lot under your leadership. So really like working with you, Ashley, and thank you for today.
Thank you. Welcome to Voices of Gender Equity, the podcast where we deep dive into real and raw stories of impact. I'm your host, Ashley McGrath, and each episode I'm aiming to inspire and influence you, our listeners, into action by sharing authentic conversations, success stories, and practical insights. Join us as we amplify the voices of amazing individuals in our community, everything from scholars to academics to CEOs and everyday champions who will be sharing their stories, practical advice, and how they're driving real change. So, whether you're a seasoned advocate or just starting to explore this fascinating topic, Voices of Gender Equity is your space to listen, learn, and engage. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome to Voices of Gender Equity, real and raw stories of impact.